The first thing having to do with our perception and how it actually opens up. The basic problem with perception associated with people is that we can only see initially what we want to see, and we can't see what we don't. And this ends up becoming the process by which, if you don't want to look at an emotion associated with a compartment, your mind won't go there. And why the practice is so important is that we need to be able to detach from these emotional compartments so that our mind can actually begin to not be blocked to seeing them. And anytime your mind or your conscious awareness uses presupposition, it is a block to your mind's ability to see clearly. And so that's one of the reasons why you can't be trying to presuppose what you're seeing and think you're going to be seeing it. It doesn't work. But when we're using the intellect, how do we know when we're comparing with the intellect whether or not we're seeing genuine knowledge of what it is or knowledge that is believed or thought to be knowledge? Because this is something that everybody is actually going to have to contend with in your understanding of what compartmentalization is. If we believe a compartment to be true, it becomes something we can't see as a compartment. It becomes what we would consider part of our knowledge base, even if it's not. And so keep in mind that what the mind, for the most part, is trying to do in the lesser Kelee is decipher the difference between the belief compartments of the ego and the thinking compartments of the intellect. Because mainly, people tend to spend more time in the intellectual process because the action-reaction process, for the most part, is forced upon us. And we don't really want to have things forced upon us. I mean, it does happen in sports where you have action-reaction and you're having to do things like that. But for the most part, when it comes to other people who are action-reaction, the intellect will most often not want to be around people like that because it's hard being constantly triggered by people's egos all the time. And once again, why the practice is so important. One of the things for your mind to watch for is when your mind wants to agree with something before you have read what it is. Until you can see for yourself, you don't. And so what ends up happening is that there can be socialized vibratory rates that we have in our mind that are levels of socialized acceptance that people have. So this is one of the things that for each person is important, that they go through almost compartment by compartment. When you come out of your practice, remember that the more detached your mind becomes in the practice, the more that it begins the process of spreading out and feeling freedom. When that happens on an internal level, you start the process of self-triggering, which means that as you feel freer and you want to open up, you bump into these compartments and then you self-trigger them. And this is just part of each person's own spiritual path. Part of what your mind is looking at is a sense of familiarity of vibrations. This is kind of more of a normal thing in society, that like attracting like. That tends to be something that our mind would rather be associated with in society when it comes to being around other people, which these days, it's very hard to not be around them. There's so many. And so part of this, when we understand what it's like to associate with likability, there's not just likability in an outward sense of what we like, but then there is the place inside where we like from in ourself. And this is actually the point that becomes the difference between the acceptance of likability and the understanding of our own likability. Why are we the way that we actually are? Watch in your practice that you can clearly understand the source of why it is that you have a good feeling about yourself and what that means to you. Because this is going to be a part of your spiritual path. And what will happen, because likability in socialization goes out this way, likability in us goes inward, inside of ourself. And that's, of course, what happens, in the practice. Like everything from here up is looking out that way. Everything from here down is looking only to yourself. So you have the collective, and then you have the individual in here. And what everyone is trying to do is trying to understand our own individuality, because it is only our individuality that can understand the collective of what humanity is doing. Pay attention when you come out of your practice to your inward feelings that don't have to do with the outside world, and it will teach you more about your inside world.